Okay. All right. So welcome everybody to our, what month is this? March Lunch and Learn, helping children develop critical executive functioning skills in 2022. My name is Olga Marable, and I am the Regional Director of Outreach for Fusion Academy, supporting our Maryland, DC, Virginia campuses. For those of you who are not familiar with Fusion Academy, we are a revolutionary private middle and high school serving 6th through 12th grade, where positive relationships unlock academic potential. All courses are one-to-one, one student and one teacher per classroom. This allows teachers to customize curriculum and teaching for each student's individual strengths, interests, and learning styles. Our supportive campus environment is a unique space that includes a state-of-the-art recording studio, mixed media art studio, and a homework cafe where students complete all homework before going home. Flexible scheduling lets students enroll at any time of the year and take classes at a time of day that works best for them. We also offer tutoring support, still one-to-one, with over 250 courses that we offer. And we are enrolling for summer credit recovery, acceleration, and skills camps. We offer a fine balance between academics as well as social emotional support through the homework cafe, social clubs, and activities. We have 7 campuses in the DMV area, and this includes our DC campus, Loudoun, Reston, Tysons, Alexandria, Rockville, and Columbia. If anybody has questions about our school, please feel free to email me after the event. So a little quick housekeeping before we jump in. So we are recording this. I will send the recording to everybody afterwards. Even if those who were not able to attend, they will still get the recording. So please know that you will receive that. You will be able to share that with your loved ones, friends, colleagues. Do feel free to turn your camera off if you don't want to be on the recording. I definitely respect that too. Please do keep yourself muted throughout the presentation just so we don't distract the speakers. But we will have a Q&A at the end where you can take yourself off mute. Also, please rename yourself to be your first and last name. So that way, if you have a question, I can address you by the appropriate name. The chat will remain open throughout the entire presentation. So please feel free to utilize it for collaboration, networking. If you want to exchange information throughout, please feel free to utilize that. I definitely encourage it. The presenters won't be moderating it, but I will be. And if you want a private chat me at any point in the presentation, please feel free. I will be checking that too. Like I said, we will have a Q&A at the end, so please feel free to hold on to your questions until the end. But if you do have a question you don't want to forget, drop it in the chat. I will hold on to it till the end and I will read them off for you. But when we do get to the Q&A, I just ask, please keep the questions appropriate and not too personal. We definitely have a lot of people on here. So I kind of want to know who's here, get to know you guys, get you guys utilizing the chat a little bit. So can you in the chat, I'm going to paste it so you guys know what to put. But if you can put your name, the company and your title, if you're a professional, your contact information, your website, your email, phone number, whatever you want to include. And here's the fun piece, your favorite vacation spot, since we're approaching spring break and summer break. So we'd just love to know who's here. And if you want to share what hat you're wearing, if you're a parent, you're a professional, feel free to share that too. So I'm dropping the assignment into the chat. Go ahead and answer it, and I'll kind of just read off of them too. Hi, Dahlia, parent, Mexico. Nice.
Olga, can I say a couple of things? Yeah. When you are chatting in the chat, there's an option to just chat with the hosts or to chat with everyone. So just be mindful of that. If you're writing your contact information, be mindful of that you are sending that out to everyone if that's your intent. And if you are a parent, please include the age of your child or children that you're here trying to get information for. That would be helpful for us. And Olga, you forgot to mention my favorite part of Fusion. There's so many wonderful things about Fusion, but I love that kids are on a first name basis with their teachers. It really sets the tone for the unique learning environment there. It's awesome. I loved that. All my tours, all the different campuses. I love it.
Thanks, Evan. I appreciate that. That's just the norm. I forget to even mention that. I'm missing all the stuff. We have a school counselor from Genesee, Y River. Gotta say, you guys are in here deep. I see a lot of people from Y River Upper School here, which is really cool to see. Lisa, parent of twins. Wow, bless your heart. It's amazing. So many wonderful parents at the beach. Yes. All right. Erin from Snow, welcome. Daniel, counselor, welcome. Beach. Okay. Love all these. Love the beach. So many beach options. Yes. They're still coming, so I'm still reading them. We're taking our kids to Kalahari in April, which is like an indoor water park. I'm really excited for that. So that's like our spring break trip. Well, welcome you guys. I appreciate it. Keep dropping it into the chat. Keep sharing about your trips. It's just helpful for us to kind of get to know each other, since feel very excluded sometimes when you're on a Zoom. But I'll introduce our speakers. So we have a cousin duo, Wendy Weinberger and Evan Weinberger, CEOs of Illuminos LLC, an academic coaching and tutoring company. I definitely don't want to steal the spotlight for them. I'll let them continue to introduce themselves and present today. So take it away, guys.
Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome from truly all over, and particularly the 7 campuses. I can't believe that, 7 campuses all over the DMV area. My name is Evan Weinberger. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Illuminos. Wendy Weinberger is here. She is the co-founder and president of Illuminos, and we are excited to present about helping children develop critical executive function skills with you today. Just to give you a few minutes worth about me, so we have an original location called Staying Ahead of the Game in Texas that I started and founded in 2006, in June of 2006. After about 10 years in business and expanding into different areas of Texas, I co-founded Illuminos with Wendy, who's here as well. And we'll be jumping in as I inevitably forget some little things and little points here and there. In order to bring these wonderful services and 360-degree approach to learning and helping kids really build these foundational skills that represent helping them kind of learn how to learn, those skills that are absolutely essential for helping kids to be successful now and to juggle those short-term, medium-term, long-term type of assignments from by the time they're in middle school, 6, 7, 8 different teachers, and how to build those systems that represent the foundation for success in school now as they matriculate in school over the next several years, college, potentially graduate school, but then as they transition into real life, we'll talk about how these skills are so critical both in school and beyond. So it couldn't be a more important topic, and I'm super excited to be here, Wendy and I both, to present with you today. In addition to traditional kind of subject tutoring and support, all subjects K through 12 and standardized test prep, I think what really drives our services and makes it unique is this flagship research-driven proprietary executive function curriculum. And I'm going to just share some research-driven strategies and tips right from our playbook with all of you today. And many of these, I think that you can start implementing literally tonight at home with your kids, or tomorrow with your clients, patients, or students at school or organizations that you work with. So my goal is for everybody to walk away with at least 2 or 3 tidbits, if not more, that they can start implementing immediately. So thank you for being here. We will do this presentation first. As we go along, please put your questions into the chat box, and then Olga and Wendy will be monitoring those, and when we get to a Q&A at the end, anything that wasn't covered later in the presentation, consolidate some of those questions and then bring that up. So hopefully, I'd like to get all of your questions answered, and we'll do our best to do so. So thank you very much. And without further ado, let's jump in. All right. So I always appreciate when speakers, kind of give me a breakdown of the things that we're going to be covering. So I know what to expect. And also in the event that I'm miserable, I know how much longer I need to be here. Okay. So I'm excited with so much to talk about. I think we're scheduled until about 9:30 p.m. tonight. So we'll have plenty of time. We'll take some breaks. I'm just kidding. I know we have about an hour and a half. And so this presentation will be about an hour. And we're going to cover what are executive function skills. So we'll talk about the definition of executive function skills so we're all on the same page. that may be a term that you've heard tossed around. Some of us think that we're, kind of familiar, but I want to make sure we all get on the same page about what are we talking about here? What are executive function skills? And then we'll talk about some executive function challenges and how to identify kids with executive function challenges. And when there is executive dysfunction, what does that actually look like? And then we'll talk about kind of zooming in on some habits and routines at home, some habits and routines in the classroom for those who are educators. And then I want to zoom in on something that I think is really important, which is effectively using a planner. I see more and more kids just abandoning that skill altogether and really in favor of these online portals, which were intended to be a resource originally to parents, and then might as well make them available to the students too. But a lot of kids have just abandoned their traditional planners altogether in favor of just becoming fully dependent on these online portals that are only as good as the information that's in them. And since students don't really control that information, and some students need to work a little bit harder in some classes or further ahead in some courses based on how we're wired up, unfortunately, those online portals are not really a planner. So we'll talk more about that as we move along. So first, I'd like to get to what is executive function. So this is a definition that was developed by some folks much sharper than myself. It's from the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University. This is up here. All of you can read. I'll let you guys read this, but I want to highlight some really critical areas here. Think of executive function skills. It's kind of like the CEO of the brain. And these are the set of skills and mental processes kind of that help us to plan and focus attention and direct our efforts and remember instructions and alleviate forgetfulness and juggle multiple tasks successfully. Think about like an air traffic controller, right? At a busy airport. I'm in Texas. Houston's a big city, one of the major cities in the country. I know Dulles is a big airport as well. There is an air traffic controller who is managing those departures and arrivals of planes of all different shapes, sizes, coming from all different directions, all different places. And it's really critical, for reasons we don't have to get into, that they don't collide or crash. And so it requires a really organized and strategic approach. And that's a really good analogy to what executive function skills in this frontal lobe part of the brain, which we'll get into in a little while, what role that plays for us. And so it helps us to filter distractions and prioritize tasks, set and achieve goals, control impulses. And then I just want to highlight at the bottom here, this is so critical and one of the reasons why we're all here, the difference between abilities and skills. And so, take something like social skills. So if you look back far enough in the primary literature, it was actually called social ability. And the difference between abilities and skills are these things that ability are these things we're born with, and either you're good at doing this or you're not. But as we kind of moved on, now we call it social skills because we know that they are truly skills and they can be taught and they can be learned. So with regard to executive function, these skills provide critical supports for learning and development. And this is so critical. While we are not necessarily born with these skills, some folks are naturally better than others, but while we aren't necessarily born with these skills, we are born with the potential to develop them through interaction and practice. And so we're going to really zoom in on that today and talk about what are some ways that we can identify students who are struggling and some things that parents and professionals and educators can do to help facilitate the ongoing development of these critical skills. So what is executive function? It allows us to control impulses and emotions. It allows us to be flexible and see that there are different rules that apply here that maybe in this setting, there are different rules that apply there. And to be flexible, the impact of COVID on kids' education, were called upon kids all over the world to flex these muscles more frequently and in a way that we've never asked them to flex these muscles before, with shutting down school and abruptly moving to virtual learning. And then when we finally do go back in person, and then we shut down a class, and so kids go back home, and then they go back to school, that cognitive flexibility. So executive function skills help us with that flexibility, planning and organizing. It helps us to set goals on the front end. That's kind of like our North Star. And we still love SMART goals, which I'll let all of you guys Google if you're not familiar. But setting goals, always having a North Star that's kind of guiding us and revisiting those goals every few weeks. So executive function skills allows us to set those goals and to plan ahead and kind of pave our path and think about what that's going to look like. And then self-manage amidst distractions and really stay focused. Follow multi-step instructions, meet goals and complete tasks. So this is the execution piece. So setting goals is great, but executive function skills is also closely tied to that execution component, what allows us to really set those goals and then execute on them and take steps every day slowly toward those goals and then ultimately achieve them. And then it enabled us to manage ourselves without being told step by step what to do next. So I think that's really important. As we move forward here, let's move to why are executive functioning skills so important for learning. So I know your neural pathways are firing, those wheels are turning already based on what we've covered, but it really is the CEO of the brain, these executive function skills. And we'll get into a little bit more on a slide coming up about kind of how the brain works and where these executive function skills lie. Spoiler alert, it's in the front in this frontal lobe. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But executive function skills are so important for learning because they're tied to working memory, which governs our ability to retain and manipulate distinct pieces of information. And this is working memory is particularly over short periods of time. And then this mental or cognitive flexibility that helps us to sustain or shift attention in response to different demands and apply different rules in different settings. So we touched on that a little bit before. And self-control that enables us to set priorities and resist impulsive actions or responses. So that self-control component is really important. And then self-motivation, which enables us to motivate ourselves intrinsically without this immediate external consequence. So at some point, maybe kids at a super young age aren't able to do this on their own, but as they grow older, it's important that we are inherently and intrinsically motivated without, when there's not necessarily a slap on the wrist. When kids go off to college, they don't show up to class, there's not really somebody that's slapping them for that or calling their dorm room and saying, hey, what's going on, right? So we need to find that intrinsic motivation, and executive function skills are so critical to helping identify those. Now, there are a lot of facts and myths around executive function skills. So this is not an exhaustive list of all of them, but I do want to highlight some important ones here, okay? So EFD, or executive function disorder, for those of you who are professionals in mental health and are familiar with the DSM, it's not a formal diagnosis. You are not going to find executive function disorder or EFD in the DSM anywhere, okay? However, EF issues are absolutely real and are part of the very definition of other learning differences. So there are a lot of learning differences that are in the DSM, from attention-related, ADHD, inattentive, hyperactive, dyslexia, dysgraphia, certain processing disorders that inherent in part of their definition are struggles with executive function, okay? And so because of that, professionals can evaluate, even though it's not a recognized disorder by itself, professionals can certainly evaluate for executive function issues because we can evaluate for those learning differences or disabilities that are in the DSM for which executive function or dysfunction, executive function issues are very part of that definition. Now, for those parents out there that think that they might have done something wrong and caused all these issues with their kids, I want you to rest well tonight and know that we do not fully understand the causes of executive function issues. It's unknown. So for those parents that said, oh gosh, my neighbor or my sister used to blend my kids' food and organic vegetables and fruit and pour them into these ice trays and then take them out one by one during meal times and thaw them out and feed them to their kids, and I didn't do that, or I stopped breastfeeding after 3 months or 4 months, or I couldn't breastfeed. Okay, give yourself a break. We do not know the exact causes of executive function issues. So it is, I can tell you with confidence that it is not giving your kids organic fruits and vegetables and blending them into ice trays is not the reason why they're having executive function issues. Okay, so cut yourselves a break. However, we do know that genetics do play a role. So we tend to see, patterns in families. And so when we see a student who's really struggling with different aspects of executive function, we can tie those struggles to one or both parents, and even further up in the family and down as well. And not every kid. We'll see families with 4 or 5 kids and 2 of them have executive function issues. Again, we don't fully understand the process, but we do have enough evidence. We don't understand the causation, but we do understand the correlation, not to get too nerdy with some terms, but we know that there must be some genetic component. The exact mechanism we don't fully understand. Now, true executive function issues, and this is interesting as well as important, but true executive function issues are present or should be present in all areas of life. So the same students who are struggling to remember the right binder, or the same students who are struggling to remember what work they have for homework, or they complete the homework and they forget to bring it to school, or they bring it to school and they forget to turn it in, okay? Those same students should also be the same students who are forgetting their soccer equipment going out the door, or their jersey for baseball, or their bat, or their glove, or their batting glove, or whatever it may be. It's not just limited to school. So true executive function issues, you're going to see that present in all areas of life. And so that's interesting to chew on. If you're not, then there could be something else going on. And I don't want to get into that in this presentation, but kind of know that. And you might want to ask some additional questions if you're not seeing that carry over from academics to non-academic life. And then executive function issues, and I'm going to say this several times in the presentation, can improve with practice. These are skills. And so, yes, some kids are inherently just kind of better with organization and with time management and advocating for themselves, but these are absolutely skills that we can teach our kids. And so keep that in mind, and we can improve upon those skills with practice. Now, again, this is not an exhaustive list, but how do I know if my child is struggling with executive function? I wanted to highlight, 8 to 10, kind of key bullets here, okay? So difficulty ordering or prioritizing tasks. So that could be a sign of executive function issues. Issues with organizing thoughts and materials. And again, this doesn't necessarily need to be limited to school. Trouble with multi-step instructions. This could be chores at home. Hey, I need you to go take a shower. I need you to brush your teeth. I need you to pick out your clothes for the next day. I need you to wrap up everything, put your backpack by the door or in the car, right? Multi-step instructions. And that has nothing to do with school. So again, crossing school and not school kind of worlds here. Giving up easily or refusing to try new things, right? This kind of touches on a fixed versus growth mindset, something that we could do an entirely other presentation on. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. Again, those are very Googleable terms, growth mindset and fixed mindset. But if your child is giving up easily and refusing to try new things as just a blanket statement, school or not school related, that could be a sign of executive function issues. Overreacting to small or unexpected changes, insistence upon doing things a certain way. So just a general lack of openness for exploring different ways that might be more efficient and kind of get you to the same place, et cetera. Repeatedly bringing the wrong things. That is a sign of executive function issues. Consistently focusing on unimportant points. So a teacher says, 6 or 7 things in class, and they hone in on this kind of one thing that they thought, a fact that the teacher said that was incorrect because they heard something different on the History Channel. And it has nothing to do with the information that's going to be covered on the upcoming assessment tomorrow, but they're really fixated on that one thing that teacher said. So consistently focusing on unimportant points, that's a sign of executive function issues, and a lack of cognitive flexibility, et cetera, openness to experience, et cetera. And then forgetting instructions very quickly, or at least appearing to forget instructions, very quickly. Some things look like forgetfulness, but aren't really truly forgetfulness. There could be distractibility, et cetera, that's involved, but that could be a sign of executive function issues. As promised, now I want to get into a little bit about brain development at the risk of getting a little nerdy, but I promise not too nerdy, okay? So in general, the brain develops from the back here to the front, okay? And by the way, the back of the brain is what houses knowledge, and the front part of the brain is really the performance part of the brain, Okay, so a lot of learning differences are performance problems. So I see a lot of kids with learning differences, but are brilliant and have tremendous knowledge, vast knowledge about an array of topics. Well, your knowledge is here, and a lot of, not all, but a lot of learning differences or learning disabilities are issues in this frontal lobe part of the brain that's in charge of executive decision making, et cetera. And by the way, humans, this frontal lobe is uniquely large. But so the brain develops from the back to the front, and this front part, because it develops last, is not fully developed until after the college years. I want to say that again, it is not fully developed until after the college years. And so that's really scary for us as parents, professionals, educators, those who are providing support and scaffolding for kids. Maybe they're not responsible for all the silly decisions that they make. Now, positive and negative reinforcement systems that are healthy, certainly very important, and we should have them. And there's a time for, punishment and consequences, et cetera. And that helps part of the learning process and to kind of shape the development of these executive function skills, et cetera. But know that when you're talking to your kids, male or female, it doesn't matter. When you're talking to your kids, that frontal lobe is not fully developed. Now, I don't want to admit this outside of this presentation, but girls, it's a little bit sooner. It's mid to late 20s. For guys, it's like late 20s and to like early 70s. I see people laughing. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's really late 20s to early 30s for guys. Okay. So it is a little bit later, but either way, even girls who are developing that frontal lobe completely first, it's still not until after those college years, which you're talking about, 22, 23, maybe 24 years old. So it's not until those mid 20s, 24, 25, that even girls have that frontal lobe fully developed. Now, keep in mind that some of the things that we talked about as signs of executive function issues, keep in mind that some of those things just characterize a teenager, okay? So we're really looking at not one or two of those bullets on the list. When we're looking at executive dysfunction, we're looking at a child who demonstrates struggles across a handful or more of those areas for a sustained period of time, okay? And then likely to have executive function challenges if a child fits a number of those symptoms. Just reiterating how important it is not to confuse a teenager being in those turbulent teenager years. Not all teenagers necessarily have executive function issues, but they will all struggle with a few of those things here and there. But again, we're looking at a handful or more over a sustained period of time. Now, habits and routines. So zooming in on this a little bit, what are some habits and routines that we as professionals, as educators in a school setting, as parents in a home setting, some things that we can do to help our kids develop these critical executive function skills, okay? So this is not an exhaustive list. We're limited on time, so I just wanted to highlight some things that I think have the most impact, okay? So one is creating a consistent flow to the week and sticking to it, all right? So I understand that not every day of the week can look the same. It just can't. But perhaps Mondays and Wednesdays can have a similar flow, and perhaps Tuesdays and Thursdays can have a similar flow. And then Fridays might look different than Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but maybe every Friday could have a certain flow of, we get up at this time, we get home from school at this time, after school, this is our routine. And again, not every day has to look the same, but the more that you can create kind of patterns that are predictable, that represent continuity to some degree, for kids, that will help them develop these critical executive function skills. Now, keep written checklists of daily responsibilities around the house in strategic places. You would laugh if you came to my house. We take this to an extreme. There's a list by the door, there's a list in the planning room or office, there's a list in the bedroom, there's a list by the mirror in the kids' bedrooms, there's a nighttime routine on the back of the door of the kids' room. So we take this to an extreme, but consider creating checklists. You can laminate those checklists. You can make them into tearaway, kind of deals. You can actually go in and check them off, and then tying those to an appropriate positive and negative reinforcement systems. Hey, if we do this and we do this successfully for a period of time, several days or for the week, Monday through Friday, whatever it may be, then you get to pick, we can get ice cream on Saturday, or you get to pick where we order food on Saturday, or you can pick which park we go to on Sunday, or something like that. But positive and negative reinforcement systems, another topic, we could have an entire presentation just on that. So I don't want to get in kind of too deep into the weeds there for positive and negative reinforcement systems, but no, for those of you who get really upset, that may be okay, but you need to get equally excited, jumping on chairs, tables, pull the pom-poms from being a cheerleader back in high school, that there needs to be a balance, and it should actually sway more on the positive side. Positivity is so critical. There's a whole new branch of psychology called positive psychology. It's so important. And so but maintaining appropriate positive and negative reinforcement systems is critical for helping kids develop these executive function skills. Now, modeling. So research tells us that modeling is still one of the most powerful tools we have for learning transfer. Believe it or not, girls end up like their moms and boys end up like their dads, with few exceptions. And part of that is the behavior, spending so much time with those figures in your life, modeling those behaviors, good and bad, parents. When you model those behaviors, your kids are picking up on that, whether when they get into those teenage years, they give you the satisfaction of letting you know that or not. They are picking up those behaviors from you. So we often go into homes, a kid is disorganized, you can't see their desk, there's no way that productivity can happen in that area. And we end up walking away giving parents homework too, because guess what? Their parents' desks look similar to the kids' desks. It's funny, the parents recognize there's a problem. They hire somebody from the outside to come in and help fix the problem for their kids, but they have the problem when you walk into their office in their home, they have that exact same problem. So I give parents homework too. And so modeling is so powerful. Make sure that if you have rules that you can't have electronics at the table, you can't have a phone at the table, that those rules apply to you too. If you have rules that your desk needs to be clean at the end of the night or on Fridays, before the weekend begins or something like that, you need to be living by those rules as well. So model productive routines and live by the same expectations that you have for your kids. Have a healthy digital diet. Another topic we could do a whole presentation on, but now with everything that beeps and dings and blings and has a screen, literally everything. I'm seeing refrigerators now that have screens on them and are connected to the internet. It's wild. And so with everything having a screen and the nature of games, they've changed. When I was growing up, a new game would come out, it'd be really exciting. You go get that game, and then it's all I would do for the whole weekend. I had 2-3 days, I didn't sleep, but I'd beat the game, and then it's over. It's not exciting anymore. Now, the whole world of gaming has changed. The games don't end anymore. You just conquer more territory, or you get more coins, or you get more money, or you get more, whatever it may be. And there's somebody awake, they're online now, so they're playing with other people, which is scary too, but there's somebody awake somewhere in the world, and not just somebody, but thousands or tens of thousands of people playing that same game somewhere in the world 24/7, and the games just don't end. So every household needs to have a digital diet. It may look different from household to household. It may look different for kids of different ages within the same household, but every household should have a digital diet. Talk to your counselors at school, talk to your mental health professionals. They can certainly help you with some current best practices. And this is a dynamic field of research. So the information is truly changing. Every 6 months, we know more than we did 6 months before that. But just know digital diet is important. Recognizing effort more than results or deliverables in order to encourage the development of a growth mindset. I mentioned this earlier, but a growth mindset is really something that helps us to be excited about challenges and to meet those challenges and to put everything that we have and all of our effort into conquering those challenges. A fixed mindset goes back to, I can't do that. But you didn't even try. I know I can't do that. Like it's just a general unwillingness to try new things, closed-minded to trying things a different way, et cetera. Young kids have an entirely growth mindset, but it's frightening that by the time kids hit like middle school, it's almost entirely switched, not completely, but almost entirely switched to a fixed mindset, unless we have intervened in the form of being proactive about recognizing effort, instead of like, hey, you got an A or a B on that. I think we can all agree as parents that we want our kids to have good grades, but it's not really that we want them to have good grades. We want them to give it their best shot. And we want their grade to be reflective of their best effort. And if that yields a C+, then I think all of us would agree that we're satisfied with that. We just want, when a kid brings home a bad grade and we know they're capable of doing better, we have a tendency to yell at them about their grades rather than saying, I don't feel this is reflective of your best effort. Had you started 3 days earlier, had you gone to visit with your teacher, had you rewritten those notes and read over them for 10 or 15 minutes each day, you would have yielded better results, right? And so we need to be more focused on effort, because that's in our hearts what we really believe and what we really mean. But be careful of that vocabulary that you're using. And then establish a consistent place for schoolwork outside of the bedroom. Okay, so working in the bedroom leads to two things, and both are bad. Okay, either we've been training ourselves since we were infants to get tired when we see or are near a bed or when we're in our bedroom. And so that happened when kids are, elementary, middle school, high school, when they get to their bedroom, from that training, many years of training, they start to get tired. And so it's not a place to be productive and do their schoolwork, because one of two things are going to happen, and both are bad. Either they're going to untrain themselves to get tired when they are in their rooms, so they get their work done, they're productive, but then they can't go to sleep, okay, which is a problem. Or the opposite, where exactly what's supposed to happen happens. They get tired, and it affects their retention and recall for the material that they did in their room. And so nothing good comes from working in the bedroom. We always encourage kids to move outside of their bedrooms. Just to get nerdy for a second again, the way that melatonin is a chemical produced right back here that helps make us tired, that when as parents, we tell our kids work before play, okay? And that's critical, work before play, but we don't really tell them why, okay? And there really is a nerdy scientific reason why. And the reason why is when we see natural light, we see that natural light, it sends a message to this back part of our brain. It's called a negative feedback inhibition loop. And it sends a message, stop producing melatonin, okay? And that helps us to stay awake, rise to the occasion, et cetera. We're 2 to 2.5 times more productive when we are near natural light. So find a place in the home that's not too noisy. Interestingly, too quiet can be distracting too, but not too noisy, lots of room to spread out, strong Wi-Fi, internet access, et cetera, so that we're not fighting ourselves the later it gets into the evening, and we can capitalize on those productive hours and, et cetera. So happy to answer more questions about that, but I want to move along for the sake of time here. So some additional suggestions: have specific places for things and use labels to keep things organized. It's funny, you'll find that when your kids go off to college and they're not really under your umbrella anymore, that you'll go and visit them and you'll see that some of those habits that you instilled pre-college by always having places for things and using labels, et cetera, that they've done some of those things on their own, which is really cool to see. So again, whether they give you the satisfaction of letting you know that that modeling or those behaviors, those habits, routines that you help them to develop pre-college are helping them in college, whether they give you that satisfaction or not, it absolutely does. So have specific places for things and use labels. Expose your kids to the things you do to maintain a functioning household. So all of you maintain a household, whether it's thinking about when to go to the grocery store and how often to do laundry, when to do laundry, how to do laundry, dishwasher routine, the dinner, making lunch. There are things that you guys do, all of you, I don't care if you're a professional, a parent, doesn't matter, in order to keep your house running smoothly. Expose your kids to some of those things that you are doing anyway. It's just a little bit more effort, but expose them to what you're doing anyway, and they will start to see that process that you go through in order to maintain that household, and they will be learning from that. Answer questions from your kids meaningfully and thoroughly. My wife hates questions. I love questions. All the questions are directed at me, but I love it. Why does that happen? Okay, and then what? And then what? And why is that? And why is that? I love it. I love the questions. And I know they can be frustrating, they can get under your skin, and sometimes they can get silly. But really, when your kids ask questions, instead of saying just because I said so, or that's just how it is, really try, and if you don't know the answer, maybe research it together, and you'll learn some important skills about how to find answers to questions and develop that curiosity, etc. So try to answer questions from kids meaningfully and thoroughly. Ask your kids to repeat instructions and expectations in order to check for understanding. So if you give your kid a list of 3, 4, 5 things to do, and they fall short, they don't do any of them, they do some of them, but not all of them, whatever, it's important to be able to narrow down how that happened or why, right? And it's easy to eliminate, well, they didn't hear me, okay? Simply by saying, I want you to repeat back to me what I asked you to do. That way you can eliminate, well, I didn't hear you. I didn't hear you say that. I don't remember you saying that. You can eliminate that as one of the reasons as you try to figure out why you aren't following through with the list of things that you give them. So easy adjustment that gives you a lot of great information. Now, reinforce that failure represents important learning moments. I tell kids, listen, there's, failure, there's no healthy relationship without arguments, right? It's not realistic. There's healthy relationships involve some disagreements. Similarly, every success story, there's no success story, career, wise, etc., that doesn't involve some falling down and skinning your knee. That's part of everybody's success story. I did this, it was wrong, or I learned from it, I adjusted, and so I did this instead. These are learning moments. When they fail a quiz or a test, or they fall short on a project, or they miss a deadline, the important conversation, it's not chastising them for what they did. The important conversation is, well, let's understand how that happened and what adjustment we can make so that that doesn't happen again. Or let's identify patterns in those things that you did wrong or got wrong, so that, maybe it's how certain questions are phrased, or it's certain objective or subjective portions of assessments, those kinds of things. So reinforce over and over again. When your kids are disappointed and they feel like they failed, that's just an impetus for a really important conversation to understand why. Share your own goals with your kids. So I talked a little bit about SMART goals. All of you, whether you write them down or not, which I encourage you to start writing them down, have goals. You probably think of them certainly around the turn of the year, but several of you might think of that more often than that. As you go through your own goal setting process, I think it is wonderful to model that for your kids and share with them what your goals are. Maybe ask them what theirs are, and you can help them go through that same process of having those goals that we know are so important, even if they change. Reward steps in the right direction rather than the end product or deliverable. So we touched on this a little bit, but I would tie rewards. In addition, before we talked about how your vocabulary, you need to use the words effort, right? I applaud your effort. You gave this your best effort. You didn't give this your best effort. This takes it to the next level and actually ties it to rewards. So you should reward steps in the right direction. Don't reward the final deliverable or the performance outcome. Reward steps in the right direction. Visual timers, love visual timers. I'm cheating and I have one with me right now. This is called a time timer. You can get these on Amazon. In fact, as we get further into the presentation, there are some things like binders and e-binders and things that we may talk about. We have a list, nothing in it for us. It's just an Amazon shopping list with some of our favorite supplies, and this is absolutely on it. These time timers or visual timers help give kids a better concept of time, predict how long things are going to take. The latest research tells us that kids can focus, and this is everybody, not just kids, for 1 minute for every year of age. We can focus 100% of our attention on a certain task at hand for 1 minute for every year of age. And then we need what we call like a brain break, okay? And so a brain break could be, just going to the bathroom and coming back. It could be walking around the table 2 times and sitting back down. It could even be just switching the neural pathways we're using. So if you're working on something for, English class and writing, switch and work on math for, another 15 minutes and then switch back. So you're just resting those neural pathways that you've been using. So the latest research tells us we can focus 100% of our attention for 1 minute for every year of age. These visual timers are fantastic. They also create a little bit of pressure. So anxiety has what we call a curvilinear relationship with performance. So that means that we need anxiety, a little bit of anxiety, in order to perform optimally. So if we have no anxiety, then we don't perform. If we have too much anxiety, we don't perform. So that's that curvilinear relationship. We need to have a little bit of anxiety. These timers, these visual timers, create just a little bit of anxiety, just enough to kind of stay focused, not get hung up on a question for 40 minutes, and to keep plowing forward. Finally, be your kids' biggest and loudest cheerleaders, So this is super important. Some of you get angry, that's okay. There's a time and place for that, but make sure you're getting disproportionately excited and happy when good, wonderful things happen. Take those pom-poms out of the closet, jump on chairs and tables. Like it is, I love that. That is great. You need to be your kids' biggest and loudest cheerleaders, no matter what they do or get themselves involved in. They're relying on you for that, and that helps them develop that executive function skills. Now, home study space. I included this here. I think this is critical. So, I touched on a few of these components, but as you're identifying a place at home, it needs to have, of course, good Wi-Fi access, room to spread out, lots of plugs to plug in the growing amount of things that we need to plug in order to get our schoolwork done. Good ventilation, natural light. If it's near a printer and all the school supplies that we need in arm's reach, that's important. So create a home study space that's really conducive to productivity and kids flexing those executive function skill muscles. So not too noisy, not too quiet, that natural light to suppress the production of melatonin so we're not fighting ourselves. Again, 2 to 3 times more productive, getting that work done as close to when school ends as possible when there's still natural light outside. And that printer nearby. I think with the growing amount of work that's never seeing paper, and this was happening pre-COVID, and certainly during COVID, we ramped it up about 3 notches, but I think a lot of that's never going to go away. There's some things that still, I think, even if it's distributed not on paper, should be made into being on paper. So print that and then interact with it, draw arrows, underline it, highlight it, circle it. I think that there are some things that we're missing out by so much work moving to being solely electronic. Even notes, kids that take notes on a computer at school, that's wonderful. I did that myself. I was one of the first at my high school to do that. But I think it's important to print out those notes when you're studying so that you can interact with those notes. That helps with the retention and recall. In terms of supplies, pens, pencils, highlighters, erasers, some of these things are obvious. Hole puncher and stapler, that's really important. Paper, note cards, sticky notes, dry erase boards, love those. Device stands, so that kind of, instead of your device taking up your whole workspace so that you have lots of room to spread out, those device stands can be really helpful for laptops or iPads. Fidget toys or jump ropes, something when kids do take those short brain breaks that they can just kind of take 2 steps this way, grab something out of a bin or a basket, and take a break for a couple minutes and then sit back down. Sometimes time gets away from us. So if you let kids go to their room, next thing you know, they're watching YouTube videos for 45 minutes when they initially intended to just have a 2 to 3 minute, max 5-minute break. Noise canceling headphones, I think, are great. Snacks and water bottles. So if kids really have quite a bit of work to do, staying hydrated and having those snacks kind of nearby helps the brain continue to work optimally. Calculator, and then again, that visual timer. Binders and e-binders. I alluded to this. I promised we were going to talk a little bit about this. I love this part. So something happens when kids transition from elementary school to middle school, and they go from having 1 or 2 teachers to having 5, 6, 7, 8 different teachers, okay? And they realize, you know what, the work is ramping up and I need to separate classwork from homework, from my notes, from tests and quizzes and projects, and I need to separate those kinds of work. Well, then their brain goes to, okay, well, the easiest way to do that is to have a binder for every class. I think that's, learning differences or not, neurotypical or not, I think that's crazy. They won't all fit in the backpack. That's conducive to forgetting things at home. I think that's nuts. So we have developed what I think is the best way over 16 years to organize. This is what we call binders, just 1 or 2 binders for kids. By the time they're in middle school and high school, it's usually 2. Sometimes, more rigorous curriculums, et cetera, there might be a use for a 3rd one. But you can have several subjects in each binder, but have these dividers dividing each subject, but then these subdividers that fit nicely kind of within that there, and have these where you can still appreciate that idea of separating the work, but without needing to have a different binder for every class. This is even more possible now that more work is kind of digital. We'll talk about e-binders in a second to address how to organize that work. But the physical binders are getting smaller and smaller because an increasing amount of work is never seen in paper. And there's no reason why kids can't maintain that level of organization, separating those different types of work, having several subjects, and then dividers and subdividers, so kids should only have a couple binders. And again, we've assembled this. If you feel free to reach out to us, happy to share completely for free this list of our favorite products with the dividers, subdividers, binders, etc. Happy to share that with you guys. Just reach out to us, and these time timers are on there as well. And you can color code them. Okay, so e-binders, that's our term for this growing amount of digital work. And it's important for kids to be equally organized with their digital work and lives as they are with their physical stuff. So we call that e-binders. Most kids are using Google Drive. It doesn't have to be. It could be Dropbox or iCloud Drive or whatever. But kids go to docs.google.com and they start working on a document. Well, that is not conducive to organization, actually. And many of you may not know this, but you can go to drive.google.com and you can still create docs, you can create spreadsheets, you can create presentations their equivalent of PowerPoint. I don't remember what they call it, but you can create all of those from drive.google.com. But the benefit is that you can create a folder architecture and even right click on the folders and change the colors of those folders within Google Drive. And if you're a real pro, you can even change those colors to match the colors in your physical binder. Okay, so we encourage kids to be just as organized, and it's so critical that they're just as organized with their digital stuff so they can find it easily. They need to be naming it appropriately, etc. Title, name, and of course it needs to be saved in a cloud. The only thing worse than losing your computer to loss or theft or whatever it may be is losing all the important stuff on it. So if they're not using a cloud-based kind of situation, they need to be transitioning to that ASAP. Now, moving forward, again, the building efficiencies, minimizing distractions, so critical supplies within arm's reach to avoid having to get up and go get things, where 2 minutes turns into 22 minutes. Browser, little efficiencies, browser bookmarks for frequently used web pages. So if the kids are accessing their portals all the time, and oftentimes for certain classes, whether it's My Math Lab or whatever, they have to go find another website or Excel, Math Excel, iExcel, right? Where they have to go and to several different websites frequently. Help your kids create browser bookmarks where they can just get into those super duper quickly. Daily schedule within Eyes View, so that's wonderful. Typically schools will give kids, even if they're in college, they'll have kind of a weekly kind of schedule. Having that on a pin board that's pinned there, where they can reference that on a regular basis is important. Whiteboards for little quick notes, and having a planner always within view. Again, these noise canceling headsets I think can be really helpful. The truth is we can't control all of the noises in the house, whether it's preparations for dinner or other siblings in the house. So just having those noise canceling headsets nearby is great. And then consider different types of chairs. There are neat bouncy chairs that are like balls that help kids with their posture. And interestingly, some of these things have been tied to helping with focus. So moving on, I want to circle back and talk for a few minutes about why kids need a planner, okay? So a few reasons. These online portals, even if they're wonderful, which they're not, and I'll get to that in a second, even if they're wonderful, Kids, they belong to the school. And so as kids go from elementary school to middle school, they're going to have a different online portal. As they go from middle school to high school, that's going to look different. And then high school to college is going to look different. So even if this online portal was wonderful, and then when they transition from college into real life, there is no portal, right? And so developing these old school kind of plannering skills is so critical, and kids just aren't developing those anymore. For some reason, they have abandoned them, and they are relying on these portals. And some teachers are better than others at updating those. I see Spanish, teachers who teach Spanish who are posting things in Spanish, and sometimes the kids can't understand the homework, et cetera. So these are a great resource. I'm not saying kids should not be logging into them regularly. They should be. But it is merely just a resource, just like sitting in class and listening to announcements is a resource, just like looking at what's being written on the board is a resource. Some teachers still give something at the start of every week or the start of every month. And so that's a resource. And those are all just resources for kids to populate their own planners. And they need to be developing that skill that they can bring with them from elementary to middle school, from middle school to high school, from high school to college, from undergrad to graduate school, and from their school life over to real life. And so kids need to be developing these plannering skills. This is also called task management as they move in away from the school world into real life. It's called task management, but productivity lies later in real life at a task management system, the intersection between a task management system and a calendar. So your task management system is a to-do list, and then the idea is those things on your to-do list aren't going to just magically do themselves. And so then you have a calendar where you set aside time to do those things that are on your list. And productivity lies at the intersection of those things. So building those plannering skills, what we call them, is so critical. And honestly, kids are different. Even two kids who have the same course schedule, their planners should be set up a little bit differently. Maybe one kid has a really a strength in math, and they don't have to study more than the night before, 2 days before for math stuff. But when it comes to English literature, whatever, that they really have to start reviewing that material and the plots and themes and characters, et cetera, a week in advance. But maybe their classmate sitting right next to them, it's the opposite, right? And so a planner needs to reflect that particular student's strengths and weaknesses and the kind of preparation each individual student needs in order to conquer assignments. So the planner should be highly, highly individualized. Now, here are some tips for using planners effectively. And, I want to point out that let's just sidestep and talk about cameras for a second. Okay, so the best camera out there, the best camera out there is this big, fancy, clunky, big camera bag, can zoom in, crazy, camera. But it's not the most popular camera. What do you think the most popular camera is? And since we're on a webinar, I'm just going to pause for a second and I'll tell you. The most popular camera is your smartphone, okay? But is it the best camera? No, it's not the best camera, right? Sometimes it is the best camera though, because the best camera is the one that you actually use and have with you. And so I think of planners kind of the same way. My wife told me that when we got married, you need a red KitchenAid mixer. I don't know that we ever use it. She said, when we had kids, we needed to buy a fancy camera. And you know what? It sits in a drawer. I think it's been used twice, and once was by someone else. We lent it to them. So we use our smartphones all the time. So planners, think of that in a similar way. I don't have a planner that I think is the best planner that all kids should be using because it is set up the best way for everyone. The truth is, the best planner is the one that kids are going to use. I care a lot more about how kids use their planners. School planners are great. They have school-specific holidays, breaks, mulligan days, whatever it may be, parent-teacher conferences. So I love, encouraging kids to use their school planners. And if they don't have one at school, either for free or for purchase, then they can search for a planner. Just make sure that they search for an academic planner. They're laid out differently than like a daily planner, for adults. And then that planner, kids need to be carrying that planner with them throughout the day. Every class, they need to have the binder for that class and then their planner, right? Possibly their pencil bag with a calculator or whatever they may need on the inside. And then students, when is the right time to write things down? The right time to write things in the planner is immediately. You can't do that unless you have it with you all the time. This goes back to 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey's book. But if you can do something in a few minutes or less, do it right now. And so the right time to write in the planner is right when you hear something that needs to be in the planner. That is the right time to write things down in the planner. And that's only possible if kids have it with them all the time. Next. Students should check their planners right when they get home. That should be part of their habit and routine. It should be ingrained and sort of make a plan of action. It takes 10 minutes or less, maybe at the beginning when you start, just like anything else, it takes a little longer, maybe 15 minutes, but taking their planner, checking their online portal, cross-checking to make sure that that they've caught everything and nothing is falling through the cracks, identifying those bigger, kind of loftier assignments, and then breaking that down into more manageable chunks, and then putting each of those chunks, assigning those chunks to different days. And we'll get to that, I think, in a moment. But students should check their planners right when they get home, and then again before bedtime to make sure they've crossed everything out. And then finally, here are the 6 steps to using a planner successfully or effectively. One is write something next to every class every day. So even if a class is only Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or there's a block schedule, it doesn't mean there's nothing to do for that class. And so write something next to every class every day. Write none if there is truly no homework. It's important to be able to differentiate between a blank and if you've thought about it and there truly is nothing that's due tomorrow and nothing due over the next few days and nothing that you should start working on, then write none. And that way you don't know, oh gosh, I forgot, I need to call a friend. You need to be able to differentiate between I haven't thought about it yet and I have no homework. And so that's easy, none or NA or NH, no homework. Write the specific assignment rather than something categorical. The more steps there are to do something, the less likely we are to do it. And so your homework should not be a treasure hunt. And so don't put bookwork and then you have to go into that class's like portal and see what the bookwork is that was assigned for that day. No, actually put page 237, numbers 1 through 21 odd, so it should be specific. Identifying those bigger, loftier, longer term kind of projects or assignments, major exams, and then breaking that down into the more manageable chunks and putting those chunks into different time frames or different days. Starring things that are due the next day. Those are critical because that means that those stars mean this is what you absolutely have to do today. And if you don't, it's going to have a direct impact on your grade or performance versus that next level of plannering, which is you've broken down something really big coming up in a week or two into little chunks, and you've identified this day as like the day you should start working on this part. That wouldn't have a star because it's not due the next day. So starring those things that are due the next day are critical, and then crossing things out when you're done is super duper critical. So that is something all of us have done this before, where we have a list of things that we've made that we need to do for the day. Even as adults, we do this. And then you think of one more thing and you just automatically do it. And you go back to your list, you add it to the list just so you can cross it out. There's something magical about crossing things off your list. And there's a lot of research behind it too that I don't want to get into, but that accomplishment is really important. So crossing things out when you're done is critical. So this concludes the formal presentation, and I appreciate everybody's attention and hanging in there with me. Again, I hope I achieved my goal where everybody can take at least a few things that they can start implementing tonight or perhaps tomorrow with their child or children. This is a way to contact us. So we'll get into questions in a moment, but hello@illuminos.co if you want that Amazon shopping list, or you want to talk about what we do, services, you can email us, call us, 571-313-5133. Our website is rich with information, wonderful blogs. You can sign up for our monthly newsletter there that has more free and timely tips like this. And then myself and Wendy are here to answer some questions from the presentations. And then I have kind of a few final words at the end in closing. But now would be a great time to jump in. Olga or Wendy, any questions or patterns for questions that you guys got? Now would be a great time to do that.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you so much. This was so wonderful. And I see you just went back a slide for Caroline, so I appreciate that. There was one question that was asked early on. It was from James. The question is, if you have a student with issues at school, but not in all classes, do you treat the same as someone with true global executive functioning issues?
Well, I'm interested to know more, and I know we're not kind of diving into the weeds on specific scenarios, but if a student is their struggles seem to be concentrated to one course or one particular teacher, there might be something that has to do more with that particular teacher's teaching style, or something going on in the classroom where that student is sitting in the classroom, and so there really might not be indicative of kind of a more global or bigger executive function, problems. It might be that there's a unique approach in that class. So I'd be interested to knowing if other students are struggling in that class, and if that's a new teacher, or if their teaching style seems to be somewhat unique. And so I want more information there, but just on the surface, it seems like zooming in and learning more about that particular class and how that class is run and that teacher's teaching style. And, if your student is having unique struggles that are different than other kids in the class, I think those, in order for me to fully answer that, I need a bit more information, but I hope that gives you a direction where you can kind of at least start a conversation with the school, and kind of dig a little bit deeper. But I wouldn't jump to a conclusion that it's indicative of kind of global executive function or issues or executive dysfunction.
Great, thanks, Evan. All right, I'm just going to keep going down the list. The next questions. This one's from Angela. What type of tips, suggestions do you have for morning routine and helping your teenager to become more independent with it? He has ADHD and has been such a struggle for us for years. And it has been, not he has, it has.
And Evan, I don't know if you can hear me, but just to add, we have sat down and made a plan together and then tried to execute that plan, but it's still not working, like moving the alarm clock so he has to get out of bed and turn it off, but he returns back to bed. Or just how do you get them to come with you together and kind of try some of their ideas? I guess we just haven't been successful.
Sure. So I love this question on a few fronts, actually. So I had real issues getting up in the morning. I loved being up in the morning, but I hated getting up in the morning. I don't know if that makes sense. So what there was a few things that I did and that I have now passed along to many, many students that I think might be helpful for you. One is there's an alarm clock called the Sonic Boom. It's an alarm clock for deaf people. And it rings at a decibel level of like a Boeing 747 airplane engine. But most interestingly, it has an attachment. So there's a disc that attaches to it that goes under the mattress, and it vibrates. Okay. And I was so worried about missing things in the morning. I actually got one for each side of the bed. So I had two discs that went under my mattress, and I staggered them about 3 minutes apart from each other. So that addressed the issue for me of not being able to get up in the morning when I had really important things I really needed to get up for, and I wanted to be up, but it was like my mind was in a different place in the morning. I wasn't thinking rationally. I couldn't get up. So that's one thing that could be interesting. Another thing that might be even more interesting for you is it sounds like your son or maybe daughter it sounds like they are more of an evening person than a morning person, and that's a real thing. That really is. So I would err on the side of minimizing the to-do list for the morning and doing as many of those things that you could possibly do the night before. And so, for example, something like picking out your clothes is something you would do the next morning, but you could do that the night before, laying your clothes out. So that literally all you have to do is put it on, right? Wrapping up all of your schoolwork and getting it into your backpack and getting that backpack, into the car or into the door by the garage. So I would stack the evening checklist and make that heavier and larger and longer, and keep the morning checklist. Use that maybe alarm clock technique for getting up in the morning, but then keeping that list when they do get up. It's literally, get up, put your clothes on, brush your teeth, get in the car. Like it's only like 3 items like on the list, but the evening before there are like 7 or 8 things on the list. So I think that could be helpful in getting out the door in the morning. I mean, I'm assuming that your son or daughter wants to be better in the morning and wants to be on time to things and wants to get up. It's just getting to a point where they are doing those things. And so I think those are a couple ideas that might be helpful.
Thank you, Evan. Next question is from Liza. The question is, do you have suggestions or strategy for students who struggle with impulsivity?
Ooh, with impulsivity. So yes, I think positive and negative reinforcement systems are helpful for impulsivity. And so, whether talking to the counselor at school, or I don't know if you're engaged with a mental health professional now or not, but I think that can be helpful as far as some ideas. Natural consequences. So impulsive behaviors tend to have, natural consequences. And so I think having discussions around those natural consequences, like not stepping in as parents tend to do and try to prevent those natural consequences, but instead allow those to happen and use that as a jumping off point for a conversation about, when you came out, lashed out and said this, that made this person feel like this. And then they're having their birthday party this weekend and you're sad because you weren't invited. And so do you think that those might have a connection, right? I think finding discussion points, that's just one example, but embracing some of those natural consequences and using those as discussion points. But impulsivity is tough. I don't know how old your child is, but that's impulsivity can be tough. But those are a couple ideas, and if you have some more specific questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk more specifically about your situation and see if there's more I have to offer.
Thanks, Evan. The next question is from Hillary. How can I help a child use the planner that was purchased? She just doesn't use it.
So there's a couple approaches. One is, remember I said I don't really care what planner kids use. The important thing is that they use it. And so I would ask her if sometimes, kids, they don't mind letting the people around them down, but they don't want to let themselves down. So perhaps you could say, okay, honey, it sounds like this planner you just really aren't up for using. Okay. So what if we pick one out together that, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's the colors or the size or, that you like more. And why don't you pick that out and let's see if you'll use that one. And that way they're part of the decision of what planner to get. And if they're not using it at that point, then they're sort of letting themselves down also, and not just you. So it might be that they felt like you imposed a certain planner on them. Another thing that could help is, again, having healthy kind of a carrot and a stick, right? The positive and negative reinforcement systems, right? So I think tying the use of the planner in short increments, so not for the entire semester, but like just for 2 days initially, and then for an entire week, or something. And if you will check it on this day every week, and if you've used it for the week, then these neat things will happen. And if you haven't, then this will happen, right? So we use positive and negative reinforcement in order to encourage behaviors that we want more of and discourage those behaviors that we want less of, right? So I think utilizing that could also be helpful. So there's a couple ideas. Explaining why it's important. Just a third idea. Sometimes kids, they just see things that mom and dad or a teacher says to them as, this is just what they want me to do. But if you take some time to explain why it's important, and though you don't get a grade specifically for keeping a planner, that everyone who is successful in getting good grades has some kind of task management, type of system. So while you don't get a grade directly for it, it is absolutely tied to, your success. And I don't know how old they are now, but maybe the work hasn't picked up to the point where, procrastination, they're kind of is getting the best of them. Like maybe they're at a level where they can still do everything the night before and get away with it, but that's not going to last for very long. As they matriculate, the work's going to pick up, and having that skill ready to go when that work does pick up is essential. So sometimes explaining why it's important can be helpful. So I hope those tips at least kind of get you pointed in a good direction.
We have a lot of really good questions coming in. The next one is from Diala. I hope I said your name right. The question is, do ADHD meds like Ritalin and Adderall help with executive functioning issues?
Sure. So great question. I have to preface my answer with I'm not a medical doctor. So for the purpose of this recording, I cannot have to say on record that I'm not advising you or anyone else about your medication, adjustments to your medication, et cetera. But I can speak about my own experiences with medication. And you can certainly ask the psychiatrist or possibly pediatrician who's prescribing those medications their opinion, and they would be in a position to suggest altering or modifying things. But a few things that I can tell you from my own experiences with medication. So medication helps to, you have these neurotransmitters that are traveling from neuron to neuron. And so folks with certain learning differences may have some extra space there, and some of those neurotransmitters are not making it, to the next one. And so some of the stimulants and medications, which Ritalin is a stimulant, Adderall is a stimulant, kind of help those neurotransmitters along to make it when they're firing from neuron to neuron. So they don't do your homework for you, but it gives you some of the foundation. It connects some of the dots in a way where you have the foundation and capacity that you might not normally have in order to do those things that you're trying to do. Now, if you're trying to clean out your closet, then it will help you to kind of focus, connect the dots, et cetera, in cleaning out your closet. So it's not a school related miracle drug, right? But it does something biologically and scientifically and kind of chemically for you, where it connects some of these dots, but it's still up to the individual on where they target that power, right? And so if a student really wants to do better in school, then that can help to bridge the gap, so to speak, and give them some of that capacity that they don't normally have in order to sustain focus and direct that attention to school-related stuff. If they're committed not to do school-related stuff and instead clean out their closet or do a video game, then it will help them, with that. So I want to be clear about kind of the function or purpose of medications. And then, there's a myth that, once you start medication, you don't have to be on this forever, for your entire life. And that's not true either. I personally took medication for many years. I didn't always like the way it made me feel, but I did recognize the value that it had for me on days that I needed to perform in a certain way. I had multiple tests, these kinds of things. And I have not at this juncture taken medication in the last 8 years or 9 years. And so you start to build some compensatory skills and executive function skills, which do represent essential compensatory skills of how to function, maybe initially with the help of what the medications do and stimulants do for you chemically, biologically, kind of in your brain. But once you start to solidify, habitualize, and make routine some of these executive function skills that represent important compensatory skills, then you don't need that scaffolding necessarily anymore because you've created those habits and routines. And again, I need to finish the same way I started with, I am not a medical doctor, so I am not offering you advice for your medication or how to modify that, just sharing my own experiences. And I hope that's helpful.
I think that was beautifully answered. Thank you, Evan. And that was the last question actually in the chat. So we do have a couple more minutes. If anybody has any additional questions, please feel free to ask.
Awesome. And while folks are thinking about that, the two nicest things that you can ever give someone are time and attention. And today, all of you gave me both. So I really appreciate that. That really warms my heart that so many of you did that today. I hope this was helpful. In addition to questions in the chat box, always open for feedback. So I'd love some feedback on, how I might be able to cater the presentation to be more helpful moving forward. Or if you did find it helpful, that's wonderful information for us. I did want to note while we're waiting on any more questions coming up, you guys we're very active on social media, so you can follow us on Instagram at Illuminos_coaching, and on Facebook at Illuminos Coaching, and we're website, newsletter. We've got some wonderful information on there, and you can reach out to us through all of those mediums too. And really appreciate everybody joining. Yes, we do have the Amazon. I see a question there about the Amazon link. We do have it. Wendy, if you could put it in the chat box, that would be great. If not, you can email us at hello@illuminos.co, and we're happy to reply with that.
Evan, we do have a question from Angela. Any advice on calming kits for frustrations?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. Questions on what?
Any advice on calming kits for frustrations?
Calming kids when they're frustrated. I think.
Sorry, KITS.
Oh, calming kits for frustration. No, you stumped me. I think, I don't know about any kits. I can tell you that, the fidget toys were kind of helpful with focus, and the stress balls and things. Now they have those little poppets, those little poppers or poppets, which are nice because they don't make noise and kids can't throw them at each other and hurt themselves or hurt anyone else. And so those are neat. But in terms of kind of specific kits for frustration, I don't have any tricks in my bag for that.
I sent a link. It's called Mindful Land Kit. I use it on my daughter. It was recommended by her therapist, and she loves it. So just check it out. I sent the link in the chat.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you for being part of this wonderful community. Appreciate that.
Do you know of an electronic planner that has worked with anybody you've worked with?
Sure. So there are some folks, I like to start with the kind of regular planners, particularly for college kids. I think that the digital solutions have worked nicely, but for people with Apple devices, I really, I like, I'm gonna look up a few of them because I actually have them right here on my phone. So Things is fantastic for folks who have Apples. So yes, iStudies Pro. There is I think iProcrastinate also is two digital kind of school driven planners. But in terms of just general task managers, I think this world, there was in terms of apps, there was one or two, and then there was 200,000, and now there's here are the top 10 or whatever. So my favorites are Todoist. I think is fantastic. Things, which might be unique to Apple, has been wonderful. To Do, the number 2, and then DO is one that some of my clients have used in the past and loved. And honestly, the most important thing about a planner is one that somebody will actually use. I've had folks with a lot of success just use their reminders app on their phone, or even keep in their notes app one of the notes that says to do, and they just keep an ongoing list, and they've got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, weekend on there. But Things, is probably my favorite. Wendy put My Homework in there. That's another one that's school driven, where you actually put in your courses and you can put in what percentage your quizzes versus your tests, and it'll calculate your average, so I'm familiar with that one too. But particularly my college students really love the way Things integrates with the calendar. And you can see everything that's on your calendar and then take tasks and put them under each day. And it keeps a log of everything that you've done, so that you can always look back and see how productive you were. And so those are some digital solutions. But I for kids, especially pre-college, to really start with an old school planner. And I found that if they're unwilling to use that, a digital kind of represents a pro level, right? Once you've conquered the planner, then here, let's take it up a notch, And so I like to start with a kind of a traditional planner and then move to a digital solution if either it's not working well or if they've mastered it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for re-asking the question, Jenny, because I know I missed it the first time you asked it. And So Maya has a question. I think she's trying to play matchmaker with a specific client she has in mind, Evan. So she's asking, are you into sports?
Am I into sports? Yes, some more than others, but I am into sports. But I'll tell you, we have a very big team. Between the sister companies, we have almost 150 awesome expert academic coaches and tutors who are all certified in our proprietary research-driven executive function curriculum. So if somebody's into high-level underwater basket weaving, and that's not me, it might be somebody else on the team that's into that, or hockey, or basketball, or football. Potentially, I really like. I'm a big, not college level, but pro basketball fan, NBA fan, personally. Some baseball too. But company-wide, we have a pretty elaborate process for identifying the right fit, which is so important, because what you're saying can be wonderful, but if it's not being received on the other end, then it doesn't matter how wonderful your program is. So matching for personalities and interests. In our paperwork, it asks about personalities and interests. What do your students do for fun, et cetera. So I recognize that that's important. Olga, I just want a special thank you to you and Fusion and the 7 campuses that came together to make this happen. And thanks again for everybody who's joining. And I think we're about at our time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Olga.
Really appreciate you guys. Thank you everybody who joined on a Friday, and you will receive this recording either end of today or Monday, just depends on how I get to it. But I do appreciate it. Have a beautiful weekend, and I'm sure I will speak to all of you soon. Take care.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.